New Texans safety Jimmie Ward gave his press conference the other day post-draft, and I'm going to give you a little snippet first of Jimmie Ward basically being exactly like the rest of us, which endears people to athletes more than anything. When we feel like, okay, these guys are fans just like us.
So y'all took a quarterback at 3. I said, what? We did? And then, no, at 2. And then I was like, okay, all right. Then next thing you know, it's like, yeah, somebody, we traded. I was like, we traded somebody. And I was like, okay. And then they got Will Anderson. I was like, okay, we got it then. I was like, all right. Then I was like, hold on. What did they do with that? I like that.
Oh, that was that second round pick. But then he did say, "Oh, okay, we got a couple studs after that." He came back around on it. We'll get to the full clip in a little bit. I'm Seth Payne, former Houston Texans player, current sports radio host on 610 AM. And Jimmie Ward gave a presser yesterday. It was awesome, and I haven't been able to sit down and watch the entire thing yet. So I want to do that right now with you guys. Please subscribe. That'd be awesome. Like and do all that stuff. And where possible, I enhanced the questions so you can actually hear the reporters' questions. If not, I've got the transcripts in the spots where it's a little bit sketchy, and I'll try to fill in the holes for you. This is now that you're here, how has it been getting acclimated with your teammates and coaches? We'll see if it comes through.
All right. Who's first?
Jimmie, now that you're here, much as it, quickly getting acclimated with your teammates, coaches, and how you like that?
Oh, I'm loving it. I didn't know how amazing Houston was. Just the culture, the food, and just being in its organization.
That's just okay. That's some good, like, vanilla kissing up to start off with. This guy, like, Jimmie is awesome. These are going to be some really good press conferences along the way. This is consistent with what he was like in San Francisco. So that's about as vanilla as it gets, just giving the very milk toast. Oh yeah, the culture, the food, being in this organization, it's all fine. What made you choose Houston?
What made you choose?
First of all, Miko, CU, and then I like Nick, general manager, and of course it's the South, and I got to play safety, so I get to compete for safety, starting spot. So that's the main reason why I came.
CU, he's talking about there is Corey Undlin, who's the Texans' defensive passing coordinator. He was there. I think he went from Detroit to San Francisco. So that's another little hidden. Some of the staff that they brought in, some of the more unheralded ones, at least paid some dividends for Jimmie Ward, and he thinks highly of him.
What do you think about, you were there with Miko the whole time. How did you see him develop as a coach? What was he like when he became the coordinator? Now what do you expect of him as a head coach?
Well, he was kind of stiff a little bit when at linebacker coach. No, I was just playing. He had a great sense of humor. For him to be a coach, he was coachable. You can criticize him and he'll take it and he'll learn from it. I just watched him and Coach Kyle relationship in San Fran, and when he got the defensive coordinator job, he stepped right in the shoes. And then there was some big shoes to fill because Saleh was a pretty good defensive coordinator too, but he stepped right in and we didn't lose a beat. And I think we actually got better. And now it's his first time being a head coach, and I feel like he's going to do an amazing job.
Yeah, and so a couple things there. One, like when he says that DeMeco is coachable, I'm wondering if, like, in people's minds, they think like, oh, okay, Jimmie Ward was, coaching the coach. I think it's a little bit more, it's more about like DeMeco being open to understanding that you got to change things, and probably DeMeco's own, like in his nature, he's going to be very open to feedback from his players, because he's not like a guy that's going to talk down to people. He very much just wants to treat you as somebody that wants to get better, and you just need information from the coach. So that's one thing that I think really stood out about DeMeco's 2 years as coordinator with the 49ers. They adapted, like they changed. They had to become a different defense that played different coverages. And a lot of that comes from like taking honest feedback from your players. And Jimmie Ward and DeMeco, I'll talk about it at the end of this press conference. They had some differences of opinion on how he was going to be used last year. And I think it's really a testament to DeMeco that Jimmie still chose to come here, because that's like they worked through those issues very, very well, actually. It worked out really well.
Have you gotten a chance to watch any of Jalen Petre's play from last season?
If you weren't able to hear that precisely, he said, have you had a chance to watch defensive back Jalen Petre's play from last season?
Yeah, I've been breaking down the film now. We've been talking about it, talking a lot about it. One thing I've seen that he has great ball skills, and then he can really move. Like he has some great feet. And he told me a little bit about his background story, how he played nickel in college, and that's similar to what I did. And I'm excited because it can be interchangeable, where I don't always have to cover. I don't always have to he don't always have to blitz, or he don't always have to be in the post. We can switch it up, and that's great for defense because we can disguise better.
Yeah, and that was actually the root of the disagreement that they had last year between Shanahan and Jimmie Ward, and never like butting heads, I don't think, with D'Amico, but they needed Jimmie Ward to play cornerback last year, or slot corner. And the first time they had to insert him in there without having practiced it at all during training camp or anything was against Kansas City Chiefs. So you can imagine being Jimmie Ward and all of a sudden them saying, hey, by the way, we need you to go ahead and cover this most lethal passing attack of the past decade. Okay, cool. And look, he did it. He took some lumps in that game. And then after that, though, really built on it and played really well the rest of the season. And he was open and honest about it the whole time. It was like he's got a lot of personality, but he's got a very, very good commitment to the team. I think he's going to be a really good role model for Petrie.
In the back.
You mentioned safety, playing safety again. What was the conversation with Nico about that? Was that a selling point here as opposed to other places?
So Brooks is asking, you mentioned playing safety again. Was that a selling point for the Texans?
Not necessarily. Well, it was some other coaches and teams that wanted me to play safety too, but I felt like I had a better relationship with Miko and had a better relationship with Corey Undy. And yes, he did tell me like, hey, we chatted about it a little bit. We didn't do too much talking about it when we was in San Fran, but he told me like, I'd like for you to play for me, and that's kind of where we cut that conversation off at.
Oh, okay. That's yeah. So as far as during the actual free agency period, I don't know. Yeah, I think that the way that everybody else has framed it, he's going to be playing safety. I think he can go down and play this side. Ideally, I think Jalen Petrie, the young gun, can be the safety that sometimes has to be the versatile guy that plays slot. That's a matchup, week by week thing. And the Texans right now, I think, can be pretty safe saying like he's going to be safety the whole time.
What can you share about his ability to teach? It seemed like there was a couple of players who were able to take that next step because of it.
He said, what can you say about D'Amico Ryans and how he's helped some players take the next step?
You talking about like the linebackers, or because when he was a linebacker coach or defense coordinator, or just in general? Well, to be honest, he'll call you out. I feel like no matter the age, no matter how good a guy is, all pro, Pro Bowl, you got to be able to take criticism. You got to be able to be coachable. And that's one guy who played this game and played it for a long time. And, he knows what you've been through. So, and that's one guy a lot of guys look up to. A lot of guys want to play 10 years in this league. A lot of guys want to be a starting player on defense, offense, or special team for that long in this league. So, and I think, that's what he's a role model to a lot of guys. So that's why it's easy to, listen to Miko. And that's why it's easy for him to push us too.
I really like that by Jimmy, because he points out just the basic relationship, and the thing that really works and motivates in the NFL is that if you got the right kind of guys on the team, they want to get better. Like they don't need pushing and prodding. They need to be held accountable. They need good information. And what he said about D'Amico calling you out, I mean, a lot of that is it doesn't mean that you have to tear into a guy in film or anything. But when you get called out either in front of your position or in front of the defense or the entire team, like if you got the right kind of guys, that guys don't want to get called out. You don't want to be pointed out doing the wrong thing. But also, it's part of being held accountable is that you always have that positive motivation, the carrot on the stick and everything. but it's reinforced by the fact that, man, I take a lot of pride in what I do. I want to be really good, and I know that this guy's going to keep me honest. And that's like universally what you keep hearing about DeMeco Ryans, is that he's just really tough on guys, but in a way where like you always feel respected. And I think that's important in any era. That would be the ideal coach, but especially in this era where athletes, just like they do every generation, they change. And I think that's like DeMeco's the right guy for right now for a lot of modern athletes. I'm not being a grumpy old man. I swear 100%. Guys just change. Generations like look for different things, and DeMeco straddles that line, between millennials and maybe Gen Z a little bit, and really understanding and getting them better than some other coaches.
What did you think when you traded up to get Will Anderson?
Oh, I was happy.
So John McClain asked, what did you think when they traded up to get Will Anderson?
D-line, what type of defense we're running. It's running through the front. So the more guys you got up there that can get at the quarterback and make it way easier for the DBs, make it way easier for the linebackers.
You know how hard this is to play in this league under any circumstances. I was wondering if you had perspective on John Mechie, who obviously underwent leukemia treatments last year and is doing everything he can to get out onto the field with you guys. What do you think about that kind of effort, and is he kind of an inspirational figure to guys in the locker room?
Yeah, I think so. Like what he went through, I never been through it, and that's my first time ever hearing somebody actually, going through what he went through, and I take my hat off to him, because like it's hard coming back from anything. Injury is hard coming back from fighting what he has to fight through, and just trying to catch his body back up to speed to playing with professional athletes.
As far as John Mechie goes, he's been out at OTAs, and I think they're trying to be careful about promising too much with him. He's got to be sure he's straight on every other front and feel how he's coming back. Quesenberry took a while to come back and really get to where he was eventually. And I know we've talked about this before, but I was at a fundraiser for Texas Children's Hospital the other night, where I was actually part of interviewing Peyton Manning and Eli Manning, who came in for this dinner. It was really, really cool. Just selfishly for me to interview those two guys, and I'll tell some highlights of that in a live stream later today or tomorrow. But several of the kids who were there, one of whom was still undergoing leukemia treatment, two who had been through leukemia treatment and beat it. They were the one kid was really cool. They were all really cool, but one kid was a huge Texans fan and was asking about Mechie and everything. And I realized real quickly, this kid has a standard of understanding of treatment for cancer that I'm not going to be able to. He was asking questions that I couldn't answer for him. So I'm gonna have to see if I can hook Mechie up with this kid just to talk about it. But this was a kid that had been through it, beat it, and I think is looking at Mechie very much like a guy he wants to root for. Obviously, they've got something in common.
Jim, you got to see DeMeco grow as a coach. You mentioned that earlier, and being able to take criticism too. What did you see him grow as a coach in your time in San Francisco?
So how did you see DeMeco Ryans grow as a coach?
I just seen just really.
For those of you who didn't know, Jimmie Ward was in San Francisco with DeMeco, obviously, but just in case.
Start, trusting his calls, his play calls. Sometimes he would call a certain call and won't be as aggressive, and then that next year he starts switching stuff up. Like he just start playing to his defense. If he feel like something didn't work, then he throwing it out. Just it doesn't matter. Like if we was good at it last game, good at it last week, good at it last year, he started calling plays that fit his defense.
That part of it is something that Belichick's teams have always really impressed me with, is that they get better as the season goes along. There's so many times, including when the Texans played the Patriots in the first week of 2018, so many times where at the beginning of the season, I've thought that the Patriots defenses were kind of meh. And then midway through the year, you check in on them again and you're like, oh, those two young defensive linemen are playing with much better technique. This linebacker is way better in coverage than he used to be. The guy that was a receiver and now is playing safety but switched to corner and then back to linebacker has gotten really good. Like that ability to adapt and figure out what your team is, I think is probably something that really appealed to Nick when he's looking at D'Amico's body of work, because they very much changed the types of coverages they ran. They in 2021, they had some serious issues at cornerback, and D'Amico had to adapt to that. Like, you look at some of the press from early in 2021, and it was almost like people had conceded that, like, the defense just is not going to be as good this year. And like D'Amico turned it around. So that part, the only question I have about that is, okay, is D'Amico going to be the defensive coordinator? If he is, cool for the defense. But remember when Kubiak was, a young first-time head coach and was the offensive coordinator, it took a few years for the defense to get right. That kind of oversight and either getting your hands into the muck of it or getting a veteran coordinator on the other side of the ball, that can help. But what Jimmie just said there about D'Amico is 100% borne out by the tape and by statistics.
Based on what y'all added, what for you constitutes success for y'all this season?
So Brandon Scott asking, what constitutes success for this year?
For the team.
Say that again, sorry.
What constitutes success for the team this year based off of what all y'all added in free agency and in the draft?
Really just playing together and, going out there and just, first of all, you got to protect the team, no off the field distractions. I feel like that's for every professional lead organization. And just secondly, believing in each other and trusting the coaching staff.
I love watching Jimmie Ward because I miss being around athletes like that, because he's got so much personality, but he also just, he's talking about doing the right thing off the field and not getting those off-field distractions and keeping a certain, he's talked before about keeping a certain chemistry in the locker room. And a lot of that comes from just, having your heart and goals in the right places. But that's the charismatic guys on a football team are so important, because you can withstand a few bad character guys as long as they're kind of also either introverts or whether they're if they're followers, sometimes that can be what hurts them, in some ways. But if they're followers and they go into a situation where they got a lot of really good dudes, then all of a sudden those guys who are bad character guys are following good dudes. But if your bad character guys are also charismatic leaders, then you got trouble, because it's not just them damaging themselves. It's also them, convincing other guys to stay out until 4 a.m. on a night they shouldn't be. So it's really important to have guys that are just the right kinds of pros. And Jimmie Ward is like that. He's a charismatic dude who's got his intentions and his behavior in the right place.
You signed here not necessarily knowing what the total team would look like. You wanted to play for Miko. You mentioned you were excited when Will Anderson was drafted. How closely were you paying attention to the draft? What was your overall thought when picks 2 and 3 are quarterback and a D lineman for your team?
That sounds like Adam Wexler asking, finishing with how closely were you paying attention to the draft when Will Anderson was drafted?
Well, I actually... So I'm in the B&B right now, and the cable's going in and out. So I really was getting text messages. So I was looking at the text messages, and people was updating me on who we draft, and then everybody was like, "Oh man, y'all not playing in the draft." I'm like, "Golly, what's going on?" So y'all took a quarterback at 3. I said, "What? We did?" And then no, at 2. And then I was like, "Okay, all right." Then next thing you know, it's like, "Yeah, somebody we traded." I was like, "We traded somebody," and I was like, "Okay." And then they got Will Anderson. I was like, "Okay, we got a DN." I was like, "All right." Then I was like, "Hold on. What did they do with that early 2nd round pick? Oh, we traded away?" But at the same time, hey, we got 2 studs. Those game changers. CJ, and that's his first name, right? I don't want to mispronounce it, okay? And Will, man, them guys was ballers, man, when they was young. Them franchise players right there. So I think they did. Nick and Miko did an amazing job.
Yeah, the part. See that last 33 seconds. That should have been the extent of us trying to analyze the trade afterwards. If you're a Texans fan, if you're not, then by all means, slice it and dice it and what have you. By many charts, this is the second most exorbitant price ever paid for a non-quarterback, or at least in the last 20 years, since other than the Julio Jones trade. And that's the saving grace, I think. Some of the other trades you can look at and say, okay, Marcus Davenport was one of the higher up ones. Jason Babin was another one of the higher ones up. I mean, Bavin did work out eventually. They didn't use him right with the Texans. And there were a couple others that were really bad. But like the Julio Jones trade, I would say, because it worked out and because it was Julio Jones, you could have used multiple picks on a multitude of other players who would not have yielded the same effect on your team as Julio Jones. So this is ultimately going to be decided by whether A, Will works out, because Will Anderson has to work out, but B, and more importantly, is the team really good? Because if the team is really good, then people will say like, hey, the Texans were aggressive. They established a culture. Will Anderson might have 8 sacks a year, but they'll say, well, yeah, but that was all part of getting the ball rolling and being aggressive. Will Anderson could have 17 sacks a year. And if the team sucks, it'll be the dumbest trade ever. I mean, that's when you ask people, hey, 3 years from now, was the Will Anderson trade worth it? They'll be answering, not thinking about Will Anderson specifically. They'll be answering thinking, okay, have the Texans become a good team since then? So that's it remains to be seen.
There's kind of a two-part question. When you look at a guy like CJ Stroud, what he did in college, have you been able to see any of his film? And then also, last 2 years, you were in San Francisco, you had rookie quarterbacks kind of went over the locker room. What have you noticed about them during the early stages of training camp and during this OTA process to where they're able to get an advantage of building that relationship inside the locker room?
When I saw CJ,
so the first question, I actually blanked on it a little bit. But the second part was you had rookie quarterbacks. What did you notice about them in the early stages of training camp to where they were able to build relationships inside of the locker room?
Saw only a few games, the big games where I actually had time to sit there and watch a little bit. I feel like he's an amazing thrower and he has confidence, And from what I saw from Brock Purdy was he was comfortable. And they put him in the shot. Coach Kyle put him in the shotgun. He didn't really put him under the center. He kind of put him in Jimmy G offense. Jimmy G can work out of a shotgun. So, and he made him comfortable. And Brock Purdy never said anything. Every time I used to mess with him when we used to go to OTAs, I'm like, hey, let's play catch. And make sure you throw me the ball. So I just mess with him, and then he'd just look at me. He's like, no, I'm not going to throw you the ball. Never say anything. Just walk past, smirk, and I just mess with him every day. I'm like, Brock, man, what's up, man? We going to play catch today? And he just has so much poise about himself. And one day, somebody, Jimmy got hurt. I can't remember the game, but Jimmy got hurt, and Brock going. I look up. I was like, it was like Brock in the game. I was like, Brock in the game? And next thing you know, he drive down the field and score. And then he get excited. And I was like, oh, And everybody was like, okay, I think we got something. So that's one thing about it. I just see, like, if CJ come in here and he works, I'm just saying, not everybody's like Brock Purdy. I'm saying, if you're a talker, then talk. But just be yourself. When you come in here, just be yourself. If you talk. If you don't say anything, don't. But just work. That's it.
Yeah. At first, maybe you're like me. At first, I thought he was talking. Maybe you're as dense as me. When he was first talking there, I was like, "Are you talking about just playing catch?" And then I realized, like, oh no, he's defense, but he just wants him to throw an interception. So yeah, the part there that's interesting as it relates to CJ is, Bobby Slowick learning under Kyle Shanahan sees that Brock Purdy comes in and does what he's comfortable doing. And it doesn't necessarily have to be exactly what people think the Kubshanistani offense is. It doesn't have to be, majority under center, run and play action and boot all the time. It's going to be what CJ Stroud really feels best about. So that's something that we're just going to we'll have to watch and wait and see.
He's growing.
You mentioned Corey also being a part of the decision in the defense that you guys ran. What is it that's asked of your position at safety, and where do you feel in your career that you're able to do that?
Said, what's going to be asked of you in your position as safety?
To be honest, to be an extra coach. Obviously I know this defense. I'm not perfect, but at the same time, I'm pretty sure I make mistakes. But, just to try to bring the younger guys along, try to, because I've been through a lot going on my 10th year in this league. So I really just try to explain to them, and just my experience and tell them, this defense, you got to work as a string. Like, if somebody off on this defense, we can give up an explosive. But I kind of forgot your question, what you said about Corey Undy. I kind of took it a whole nother way, but
Corey Undlin is, again, the defensive passing game coordinator. Real quick before they before Brooks restates the question. I think that that's like sometimes again, you talk about veteran leadership, and sometimes it's either misunderstood or overestimated how much one guy can do. Like everything he just talked about, it really one of the most important things isn't about like giving a pep talk or anything. It's like the stuff you saw with the Astros. Thinking about Verlander and all the things he taught those young pitchers about how to prepare off the field, how to get your proper sleep, all those things. That matters. But when it comes to on the field stuff, a lot of it's just the simple technical stuff, like what to emphasize, what to focus on. And when you have a guy who's a veteran on the field, especially with defensive backs, there's usually like you got to have one Jonathan Joseph in the crew, like one guy that can really be sure everybody's on the same page. Because at defensive back, that's when all of a sudden, man, especially when you're a cornerback and the safety screws up and everybody's staring at the corner because he was the closest guy to the ball. Like that's the stuff that happens if you don't have good veteran leadership. And that's why like it's so vital that they've got somebody like Jimmie Ward. So let's see if he asks about Corey Undlin again.
You mentioned one of those things, like what are your key lessons that you've learned?
What are the lessons you learned from Corey Undlin?
Be patient. In this defense, you don't gotta force plays. Like I said earlier, that this defense is going to get ran through the defensive front. This is going to be attacking D-line, and all you got to do is be in your spot, and plays will come to you.
I know it's early, but do you see any characteristics between D'Amico and Nick that you've seen in your former team's GM and head coach?
Do you see any characteristics between D'Amico and Nick that you see in your former team's GM and head coach, which would be John Lynch and Kyle Shanahan?
You got to give me a little bit more time. It's OTAs, so I don't want to answer. I can't answer that question. I can't answer that question for you right now. You got to give me a little bit more time, and you just come back to me on that question.
You know what? I'll do that. I'll take a stab at that one real quick. Okay. From the GM side, that might be easier because I think both John Lynch and Nick Caserio, at least from what he's seen, like from what Jimmie Ward has seen, Lynch has made some pretty aggressive moves. The trade for Trey Lance, the trade for the trade for the pick that got Trey Lance, the trade for Jimmy Garoppolo. They've done some more. I mean, they ended up with not that many pet draft picks this year, and then they draft a kicker. In which round was it? Third or fourth? Whatever. They draft a kicker high, so there's maybe a little bit of if Caserio is all of a sudden YOLO Caserio, like he's just going to throw caution to the wind and start making super aggressive trades, I could see some similarities there. As far as D'Amico and Shanahan, that's a tougher one. I think I don't know if they have any more similarities than just any other random one of us might have similarities with one of them. Other than that, they both aren't really like verbose. Like they'd rather be all about the ball instead of making a whole bunch of speeches. So there's that. I think Kyle Shanahan has got a little bit more of a temper than D'Amico. Like Kyle Shanahan, I know it's funny that people used to worry about whether Kyle Shanahan had the right stuff or was too meek or something to be a head coach. Because man, like if you watched him on the sidelines during some of these games, he gets after it. He's pretty intense.
Okay. Let me think about the 49ers influence though on this roster though. You got a lot of guys that you played with before, a couple of guys that you played with in San Francisco, and then obviously the coaching influence there. What do you think?
So this is Brandon Scott asking about the influence of guys from San Francisco on the culture and identity, and if you're bringing some of it here.
Now y'all taking a piece of what y'all were doing in San Francisco and brought it here. And what about y'all's success here do you think y'all can bring here? Maybe replicate?
Really, to be honest, it's just the defense. But we gotta find our own culture. You know what I'm saying? We gotta create our own identity. We're not San Fran. We're Houston. So that's who we gonna be.
That's right. We're not Niners Gulf Coast, right? We're not gonna have any of that talk, brick by brick, because I think the one thing, the common theme I've seen between D'Amico, with Jimmie Ward, with CJ Stroud versus any of these guys, that when they talk about coming in here, I really, really like that they've got the awareness to not act like, yeah, we're gonna show these guys how to win. We're gonna show how it's done. Because I've been parts of that before, where you see a new coach come in and he's bragging about how he's going to change the culture and everything, and then 2 losing seasons later, you kind of wonder, like, oh, you've had your time, have you not? Like that arrogance, that braggadociousness doesn't really serve you well with getting like the guys that are already good on the existing team to buy in and bring it around. You don't want to throw the baby out with the bathwater. You know, there's some elements that obviously you got to get rid of in Houston, but there's some things, the good players and what have you that are here, you want to be sure that you're on board and on the same page right from the get-go.
You didn't know Houston was so amazing in the food and stuff. Well, what's caught your attention as you made your way a little bit around the city that's so good?
What has caught your attention about Houston that's so good? Wait, let me be sure. Yeah, he's talking about the city of Houston. It's time for a little bit of kissing up.
Actually, the heat caught my attention. I've been
in
Valley the last 9 years, so I gotta get used to that. I've been drinking a lot of salt. But it's beautiful, man, out here. And I was raised in the South. I was raised in Alabama, so I'm kind of used to it. Born in the Midwest, so you know, and I'm close to family. So it's like I'm just used to how friendly people are, you know, in California. You know, you can be rude. It's okay to be rude. You know, people walk past you, look, don't say anything. It's like, okay, it's normal.
Oh, he's saying it's okay to be rude in California.
You walk past somebody here, people turn around. Oh, I said, hey, how you doing, sir? I was like, oh, hey, my bad. Forgot. But, you know, other than that, it's just the culture, man. Just how y'all excited, how y'all smiling and stuff. Like, you know, it's something I'm not used to.
And let me tell you real quick, for those of you who haven't lived like outside of Texas or Houston, or maybe you live in the South and you've never been outside, like out west, up north or whatever, it's funny because like where I grew up, you know, I grew up in upstate New York, which is not New York City at all. It's very country. Like my parents my family was dairy farmers. My wife's parents were dairy farmers. But it's country, but it's not the South. So like there's still like you don't go chatting up strangers just very, very casually. And I remember my freshman year being on the bus at Cornell, and there was a kid that I would later end up being friends with, but he was from Oklahoma. And I was sitting on the bus, and this kid just starts talking to me, and I'm like I thought he was crazy. Like I thought he was loony because he was just open, having a conversation. And like now I'm that guy 100% because I've been, you know, I was opened up and exposed to that world by the time I got out of college. And but when I go back home now, I gotta tamp it down a little bit. So it's nice I can imagine if you grew up in it, especially, and then you go elsewhere where all of a sudden the humans just seem a little bit colder. It's got to be nice to come back somewhere where it's obviously a lot warmer, both in temperature and temperament.
You look at a guy like Derek Stingley last year, did not allow touchdown coverage despite playing in the big games. Do you feel like the quarterback position is one of the hardest to transition college to the NFL level? He's doing that already as a rookie. What is his upside?
Oh,
okay. So when you look at Derek Stingley from last season, do you feel like the cornerback position is one of the hardest positions to transition from college to the NFL here? I think I heard a clip here earlier. He's going to say something very complimentary. I did about the SEC.
Man, he's good. I seen how he moves around, man, dude. And he's like 6'1", 6 feet, but he moves like he's like 5'8", 5'9". Like, dude's a stud. He's going to be a stud. And then, like, his confidence is already there because when you play in an SEC, you know, the level doesn't just jump up too much because a lot of guys that he locked down when he was at LSU are in the league. How many, what, didn't they just break a record of the SEC guys that was just drafted this year or something like that? Back-to-back years? Okay, well, this guy Stingley covered majority of the top wide receivers coming out or tight ends. Like, he did this already, and that's the reason why his confidence is so high. So it's going to keep clicking for him. And the game going to slow down, and sooner or later, I'm not looking at his side. I'm finna go and steal some on the other side. Like, man, you ain't finna catch the ball on Stingley.
I was saying, yeah, he's not going to want to line up on the same side as Stingley because the balls don't come that way. So, or he's not even going to look that side. You know, okay, you know what? I'm really glad I heard that a second time because I didn't catch that the first time around. When you're a safety and, you know, let's say you're playing the middle of the field, but you know that you got Stingley over here on one side and he's got that guy locked down, it becomes a lot easier to cheat the other way and to rotate the other way or do a little mini rotation. And that's when you start seeing the true benefit of Derek Stingley, if he can be like we hope Derek Stingley can be. As far as the SEC talk, like, I usually feel like that's overblown a little bit. I think at the skill positions, that might be where it matters the most. And, you know, I'll take that back, because I think with, like, if you look like Will Anderson versus Tyree Wilson, and you guys know I was more in favor of Tyree Wilson. Now that I've had the full propaganda pounded in my head by all these people saying so much good stuff about Will Anderson, and Tyree Wilson has this Liz Frank issue, I'm easily swayed over to Will Anderson's side, and obviously I want Will Anderson to do really well. But one legitimate thing that was holding me back a little bit on Tyree Wilson was that he just didn't see as many good offensive linemen in the Big 12 as you see in the SEC. You saw plenty of good ones, but there are twice as many offensive linemen in the NFL from the SEC as there are from the Big 12. And with the defensive backs and the wide receivers especially, I think those guys the route running isn't as good by those guys, but they're closer in just the actual types of matchups they're going to see in the NFL. Because, yeah, in the offensive and defensive line, there's still, between scheme and physical maturity and everything, it's just not the same. Those marquee matchups you get on speed guys, though, I think you can tell something from there. The good thing is that I think Will Anderson has produced for 3 years full on. Derek Stingley produced for 3 years. He had one awesome year, you know, obviously, and that injuries and illness that held him back. Hopefully that's what was holding him back. But like, that body of work and getting that many reps versus those good guys is why the personnel people feel just more confident in them. It worked out. It's worked out for a lot of other people that way. You know, hopefully Derek Stingley, it works out the same way, because I think Sauce Gardner, one of the things holding back evaluators like Nick Caserio was they didn't have as much film of him against top tier talent playing at Cincinnati. They had plenty of really good stuff, but just not as much.
One of the reasons I wanted you to do was to mentor Petrie and Stingley. What can you do specifically to help two young guys like that?
Just really, the main thing
I guess you probably couldn't hear that. What did John say? John said, what can you do specifically to mentor guys like Derek Stingley and Jalen Petrie?
I'm going to do is just make sure I tell them how to take care of their body, just because I've been through a lot of injuries. So that's my main thing. Tell them to take care of their body and just, you know, stay clear-headed. You know, things going to happen in this league, and then just let them know that during the season it's a marathon. You know, right now it's OTAs. We're building up. Don't peak too early. Peak at the right time. And that's really it.
And that was it. And I'm glad. Thank you very much for bringing this up, Ty Long. Tank Dell gave Sauce Gardner the business in college. Let's not forget. Yeah, that was, the one. How many yards was it that one game where he had that freakishly awesome run where he crossed the field? He had like 170 yards receiving in that game. And there's so many times where, like, it looked like Sauce Gardner was trying to catch a tracer bullet in his hands, you know, and couldn't with Tank Dell. So that's a very, very good thing to remember and bring up. As far as the Canada hate that's going on in the comments, I hesitate to bring this up because, you know, Canadians are just generally thought to be pleasant and friendly people. But I think part of that is because the Northeasterners to the south of them have a much lower bar for what constitutes friendly behavior. So, yeah, if somebody from New York decides to go up and take a vacation in Ontario or something, then, boy, these people sure seem friendly. But like, my wife and I went to the Mariners versus the Blue Jays, and we leaving the stadium, trying to merge into an exit lane. Nobody wouldn't let nobody. 7 cars they weren't just not letting us in. They were like riding the bumpers in front of the person in front of them, like specifically not letting us in. I was quite disappointed. Part of that, though, too, is I was driving through Toronto, and you're like, oh, Yeah, Toronto's like it's an actual city. I kind of had this vision of Toronto being like a little collection of huts on the tundra somewhere and not being an actual city. But they were, yeah, I would agree, Peter. I think that they're not as friendly up there as they are in like Texas and the Southeast, but they're more friendly than a lot of people from the Northeast of the United States. Old people talk to me whenever I'm walking around. Yeah. I don't know if Shawn Michaels is talking, if that's Shawn Michaels reference to, is Shawn Michaels Canadian or did Shawn Michaels, was that the screw job? The whole Shawn fills me in on the history of wrestling. Was it the Montreal screw job or the Quebec screw job or whatever it is? Was that what happened when they split? I don't know. Oh, Canada, how I hate this place. I'd be okay with San Francisco Gulf Coast for a year if it means we win more games than we lose. Yeah, for a year, I think that you don't want to just, this is what I would always worry about if you're doing like Patriots South. Sometimes people mistakenly think that because Belichick was so good for so long, that everything Belichick did must be the right way to do it. Where I think that in reality, some things that Belichick did were the right things for Belichick. Like he can get away with his personality and maybe the way he treats people just because that's what works for Belichick. The other thing is that, so like as far as like the gruff personality, some of the like Machiavellian stuff he almost pulled or the mind games that he would pull with guys, not every coach can get away with that, but it worked for him. Having Tom Brady, that helped too. But I think the other thing is that, like, just like any other organization, Belichick probably does a bunch of things that are actually bad for his team. It's just that they're not offsetting all the really good things he does for his team. So likewise, if you were to come in here and say, well, look, we're just going to do it the way San Francisco did it, then you're going to end up copying. You're going to be emulating some of the things that San Francisco does well, except probably not as well as they do it because they're, whatever works for Shanahan is best done by Shanahan. But then you're also going to be emulating perhaps some of the bad things or negative things or detrimental things that Kyle Shanahan does. And they're going to hurt you the same way they're hurting them. It's just, there's always a balance of these things. So long story short, yeah, don't try to be San Francisco East or Gulf Coast. Just try to be the best version and the best teammate you can be. I'm going to cut up and do some of the interview that we had with Caserio later on. Sean Pendergast and I spoke with Nick Caserio this morning. I thought it was really telling. He kind of laid out the timeline of the trade, and that was really interesting. He told us that he got below 1,000 on his SATs, kind of as a way of taking down standardized testing and the S2 cognition test, which I thought was really interesting and a show of humility. I know John Lopez thinks he's lying, but we actually have proof in written form that Caserio did get below 1,000 on his SATs because there was a book written about the high school that Caserio went to, and they specifically mentioned this kid who is really smart and very a high achiever and very motivated, except got low SAT scores. And they're talking about Nick Caserio. He's already immortal in print when it comes to books about prep schools. And let's see. Have you had a chance to check out Ali Gay? I have not yet. So let me write that down. And I know I need to get with you guys on Juice Scruggs. I got to do all these things. I'm trying to keep a certain ratio of videos that get monetized to not being monetized. Not that I'm trying to make a ton of money off of this right now. I'm just kind of doing some experiments with monetization. So which is a great reason if you want to help me to go ahead and subscribe and like and all that stuff. So when I do these breakdowns, these film breakdowns, they always get demonetized. They've gotten stricter and stricter when it comes to doing the coaches film, which is fine. I do it for the love and I do it as a service to you guys. So but I might just do one big one that does like multiple UDFAs or potential free agents out there. So, all right, guys, appreciate it. Like, subscribe, and I'm going to try to do another live stream later. Awesome.